Good evening, people. I hope I'm audible for everyone. And yeah, basically, currently also I'm not well at all. It's very difficult. I think it's very difficult to stand and teach or to write because I have sprained my back on the right side. So yeah, so it's becoming very tedious. It's just not happening. So I thought that I'll take today's lecture जितना हो पाएगा. Let me just continue. So देखते हैं कहाँ तक खिंचता है. And I'm really sorry for inconvenience, but I am just not able to take. मैं कल भी सोच रही थी I'll take the class, but I was just not able to get up. And today also, अभी till 4:30 there was a doubt whether I'll take or not take. So then we decided कि let's just continue with the class. Something is better than nothing. तो जितना पढ़ा पाऊंगी I'll teach. And then we'll continue in the next class. So yeah, the last topic that we were discussing was basically communalism, and just bear with my energy level because it's just not coming from within today. Take care. So I'll try. So basically the last topic that we were discussing was religious diversity, and we were talking about religious diversity, the issues related to it. So one of the issue related to religious diversity is communalism. Okay, so that was the agenda and that we started with. So when we were discussing communalism, we discussed what is the concept of communalism, that it says that how it's an ideology or it's a belief that society is divided into different religious communities having different secular interests, that is socio-political economic interest. Then we talked about that how there are different manifestations of communalism, that is you have mild manifestation, you have moderate, and you have extreme. So when you believe that since you belong to the same group, you have same interests, that is mild. When you believe that since you guys belong to different communities, so you have different interests, even then it is not a threat to national integration, because you believe that you are belonging to different communities, so you are having different socio-political economic interest. But when you start having that perception that not only you have different interests, but your interests are mutually antagonistic, that is, the one section of society can prosper only at the expense of others, then that results into the situation of conflict, which is a threat to national integration. Then we talked about different types of communalism. That was a specific perspective which is given by T.K. Oman, and says there are 6 types of communalism. One is assimilationist, second is welfareist, third is retreatist, then you have retaliatory, separatist, and cessationist. And we have discussed the examples of all of this. The basic agenda to discuss different types of communalism was that in case the question arises, is communalism a threat to national integration? So then it would depend on what type of communalism are you practicing. If it is in the form of assimilationist, welfareist, retreatist, it is not. But in case it is of the type of retaliatory, separatist, or cessationist, then it becomes a threat to national integration. This is what we have discussed. The next topic that was supposed to be discussed is evolution of communalism in India. If I talk about the evolution of communalism in general, एक general perception है that why communalism has emerged in context of India. So the first is that communalism has emerged because communalism is rooted in India's cultural diversity, and to be specific, religious diversity. So it is rooted in India's cultural diversity or religious diversity. Now, in past, If I talk about ancient Indian period, or for that matter, even medieval Indian period, although in medieval period you might find few of the communal bickerings, but more or less both in ancient India as well as medieval India, there was the practice of religious tolerance. Practice of religious tolerance was observed. Although there were few incidences of communal bickering. For example, you did have the ruler like Aurangzeb. Okay. Here there were certain incidences where it was being perceived like Ghori's attack on Hindu temples, okay, or the attacks of Ghazni on the Hindu temples, or how Ghori had attacked basically the Hindus, the Jains. So there were few incidences, right? But apart from that, largely there was practice of religious tolerance. There was peaceful coexistence among people of different religious faith. ठीक है, सो ये था, ठीक. So if I have to, or if we have to trace the evolution of communalism in context of India, the genesis would be traced from British period. Largely it is the British rule which is responsible why communalism has evolved and why it is still persisting in context of Indian society. Is that very clear for everyone? Okay, there is nothing to write here because the main content starts from that how the genesis can be traced from the British period. So I give you 2 minutes. Just think and tell me. See, okay, let me first give you a rationale. When you answer a question in historical context, you focus more on events. But when we are writing the answer from social perspective, we look for arguments, right? So keeping in mind you have done your modern history, right? So keeping in mind those historical factors that you might have studied, right? You might have studied those events like separate electorate था, communal award था, ठीक है, या तो आपने वो सब पढ़ा है, right? Divide and rule policy of Britishers थी, ठीक है. So keeping those aspects in mind, can you give me the arguments, the factors which were responsible for evolution of communalism in context of Indian society? You have 2 minutes. Think about it and give me the reason. Think about it and give me the reason. Largely, if we have to trace the origin of communalism, although there were certain bickerings which were happened, as in few incidences were there here and there, but largely communal fervor did not emerge in context of ancient or medieval India. So that hardcore practice of communalism as an ideology and its violent manifestation was largely visible in context of British period. Is that clear? Give me some points which can be written here. Anything that you can think of. First and foremost, what can be the possible factor which can be responsible for evolution of communalism in context of India? See, you need to understand, at the time of British rule, the agriculture was becoming stagnant, right? Handicraft, artisan industry had already declined. There was emergence of modern industrial system. However, there was not enough. The industries which were even developing were not enough to absorb all the middle class youth whose aspirations were to improve their socio-economic conditions. Most importantly, there was exposure to English language, there was exposure to secular education. So they were looking for the opportunities for improvement or satisfying their aspirations with respect to socio-economic premise. But those aspirations were not getting served. So the demand of job opportunities were high, but the supply of those job opportunities were very limited. Why it was limited? Because your agriculture was stagnant. There was lack of modern industrial development. There was lack of adequate availability of job opportunities. And because of this discrepancy between demand and supply, people resorted to nepotism, favoritism, groupism, and all these factors resulted into evolution of communalism. So when your nepotism, favoritism, groupism is on the basis of religious identities, it has given rise to communalism. That is one of the factors which was responsible for emergence of communalism in context of India. The second factor which was responsible is that it is an irony. The socio-economic conditions have been such that in context of India, the religious distinctions coincides with the class distinctions. I'll explain the concept, just write down. Socio-economic reality in India is such that religious distinctions coincided with class distinctions. For example, Hindu zamindars versus Muslim peasants. So here the religious distinctions are coinciding with the class distinction. I'll give you an example to explain this. And this is not very specific to British period. It has been existing even in post-independence period. Now, is everybody aware about the fact that post-independence, the first thing the government did was the implementation of land reforms, introduction of land reforms? And the first land reform was abolition of zamindari system, right? Now, usually when we tend to refer that which state has been successful in implementation of land reforms, the names which comes to your mind is West Bengal, Kerala, right? However, in reality, it was Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir was very successful with respect to implementation of land reforms. And that time there was a leader in context of Jammu and Kashmir. His name was Sheikh Abdullah. He was a very socialist and a secular person, right? As contrary to the beliefs of many, but yes, he was a socialist and he was a secular person. So the first thing that he wanted to do was implementation of the land reforms, right? But the irony was that most of the zamindar class were Hindus and most of the peasant class were Muslims. So although he was implementing a socialist measure, that is redistribution of wealth, equitable distribution of land, land to the tiller. So that is what he was trying to do. So he was implementing those measures in the socialist capacity. But since the irony was that the class distinction was coinciding with the religious distinction, it was seen that a Muslim ruler is trying, the Muslim ruler is trying to protect the interest of the Muslim peasants against the interest of the Hindu zamindar. That is the irony. Although he was a secular person, he was a socialist person, and he was implementing the policies which were socialist in nature. But since the irony was that the class distinction was coinciding with the religious distinction, so the socialist measure was seen in the prism of religious differences, which gave rise to the communal fervor. Is that very clear? Okay. So this is just one specific example to make you understand that how this factor also resulted into the emergence or the evolution of communalism in context of India. Are the 2 points clear for everyone? Okay. One, that the aspirations and the interest of middle class in a social situation which did not offer them adequate opportunity created grounds for communal politics. I've given you an easier version to understand this statement. So the aspiration and interest of middle class youth was not getting satisfied in a social situation which gave rise to the communal politics. And why it was not getting served? Because there were not adequate opportunities for employment. And why there were not adequate opportunities? These were the factors. So it resulted into emergence of communal politics. That is, you are playing your politics by dividing people on religious lines. Similarly, socio-economic reality. The next point which could have been added here is, ऐसा नहीं था कि among Muslims elite class was not existing. So communalism also evolved due to power struggle among elites of different religious communities. For example, if this is my Western Punjab and this is Eastern Bengal, then here the struggle was between Hindu zamindars versus Muslim jotedars, and here the struggle was between Muslim zamindar versus Hindu moneylender. This can also be the factor responsible why communalism has evolved during the British period. Once you've written this, please let me know. So communalism also evolved due to power struggle among elites of different religious communities. For example, in context of Western Punjab, the struggle was between Muslim zamindars versus Hindu moneylenders, whereas in context of Eastern Bengal, it was Hindu zamindars versus Muslim jotedars. Okay? Then ultimately, it was the divide and rule policy of the Britishers, which has played a very significant role in evolution of communalism in context of India. So finally, it was divide and rule policy of Britishers. They always believed that if Hindu and Muslims remain disunited, it would be easy for them to perpetuate their rule over Indian continent or Indian land. Is that very clear? So divide and rule policy of Britishers, where communalism was used as a prop. Communalism was used as a prop as in the tool, to further their colonial interest. So whether it was the communal award which was being given, whether it was the separate electorate, whether it was the tolerance towards communal press, or acting late to crush any incidents of communal violence, that is laxity with respect to the response. So you can write down those points. For example, tolerance towards communal press, separate electorate, you can add more points to it. But all of this would come under one heading. That is divide and rule policy of Britishers. So whether it is favoring one community against others in services or in the matter of promotion, that is with respect to government jobs, with respect to educational aspects or concessions, with respect to political positions. So the communal politics during that time, in fact, Bipin Chandra made a statement also, itna likho fir likhte hain. Write this much, then let me know. एक पॉइंट और ऐड कर सकते हो, पॉलिसी ऑफ फेवरिंग with respect to job, promotion, etc. So these are nothing but the examples of divide and rule policy. Laxity with respect to response to any incidents of violence, as in prompt response is not there. If you ever get time, do read a list of incidences of communal violence that has happened in past in India. You will find one of the major factor which was responsible is laxity on the part of law and order mechanism, laxity on the part of police, laxity on the part of administration, so as to ensure quick response to any act of violence. Is that very clear? Incidents of violence. Oh, acha, it's not visible. I'm so sorry. Laxity with respect to response to any incidents of violence. Sorry, yaar, I'll not write that side. Policy of favoring one community against another with respect to job, promotions, etc. Policy of favoring one community against another with respect to jobs, promotions, etc. Write down. Write down. According to Bipin Chandra, एक statement बस मैं दे रही हूं. According to Bipin Chandra, communal politics for a very large period of time, communal politics for a very long period of time was organized around communal politics for a very long period of time was organized around government jobs, educational concessions, political positions, etc. Political positions, etc. Communalism basically developed, communalism in simple words, basically developed to serve economic and political interest. Communalism basically developed to serve economic and political interest. In fact, the vested interest of few, vested interest, personal, in fact, vested interest of few encouraged communalism due to its capability, encouraged communalism. In fact, vested interest of few encouraged communalism due to its capability to divert and distort, popular struggle, to divert and distort popular struggle and prevent masses from understanding the real issue. And prevent masses from understanding the real issue. And prevent masses from understanding the real issue. हो नहीं रहा, ऐसे ही रहने देते हैं. I'll not write on the sides. Is that clear? In fact, ये जो last statement है, that vested interest of few encourages communalism because of its capability to distort or to divert popular struggle and to prevent the masses from understanding what is the real issue. This is evident even today also. जब कुछ नहीं मिलता, लोगों का ध्यान भटकाना होता है, you resort to religion. ठीक है, you start dividing people on religious lines because that will keep persons so engrossed in their religious identity, fighting with other community, that their attention from the major issue, whether infrastructural development has happened or not, whether employment has been generated or not, whether economy has grown or not, what level the corruption is happening, your mind would not be attentive towards those major, those real issues. So that is the capability of communalism, and based on that capability of communalism, it is often been encouraged by those who wants to exactly that's what I was trying to say. I didn't read yours, but yes, that is very true. is बिल्कुल बिल्कुल वैभव कह सकते बिल्कुल कह सकते हैं. ठीक है ना? Is this very clear? Absolutely. In fact, पता है, I don't know. Okay, one very interesting thing. Yesterday, a friend called up, okay, and she's a doctor. And she's a, we assume na, doctors are very intelligent and they're very hardworking. They study a lot. And my friend is genuinely so very hardworking and everything. And she's a good doctor. So she just called up in the night and one after the other calls were there. So I was like, maybe something very urgent. She's like, no, Smriti, I really want to talk. I thought, pata nahi kya ho gaya. She's like, what do you mean by communalism? And trust me, I have not made this story, okay? This happened just last night. And it is just a coincidence that I was supposed to teach you communalism. So I was like, tujhe kya ho gaya? Matlab, why all of a sudden communalism? And what kind of question is this? What is communalism? Fine, then I told her what is communalism in a simple language you need to understand when you are practicing your politics, linking it with religion. So she understood. She like, then what is secularism? I was like, when your state is, separated from religion, your religion is not allowed to interfere in state matters. शी लाइक अच्छा, तो बोलती अभी क्या चल रहा है, अभी का क्या सिनेरियो है, हम क्या हैं? I was like, यार देखना, मतलब just look around what's happening and try. I have told you what is communalism, right? What is secularism? Now you tell me, what do you think is the current situation? Like, नहीं नहीं नहीं, मुझे बता. I was like, क्या हो गया? Because I have a conference to attend where I have to talk about communalism and secularism. I need to tell what is their state in today's time. You know, that was a very genuine question which she asked. But after answering her question, I told her that, do you realize where the problem lies? That the educated youth like you don't even know what is happening around. Just because you're a doctor, you're only concerned with that medical aspect. In fact, you can bring so much of change in the society because you are educated. And it is, trust me, if you prepare for UPSC, consider yourself lucky that at least you become aware. Otherwise, if you have been working in those offices of Gurgaon, Noida, Bangalore, the Silicon Valley, the medical aspect, this chartered accountant, or whatsoever it is, you are not even concerned. और ऐसा नहीं है कि ये एक ऐसा बंदा है जो कंसर्न नहीं है. आई हैव अ लॉन्ग लिस्ट वेयर पीपल आर डूइंग सो वेल इन देयर रिस्पेक्टिव फील्ड्स, रिस्पेक्टिव करियर्स. दैट मीन्स दे हैव द स्किल, दे हैव द एप्टीट्यूड ऑफ डूइंग दैट स्टफ, बट दे आर नॉट अवेयर अबाउट व्हाट इज हैपनिंग अराउंड. Right? So now I was just, after even explaining what is communalism and secularism, she was still asking, what do you think, what is the current state? क्या लगता है तेरे को, क्या बोल सकती हूं मैं? तो मैंने बताया, बोलती नहीं नहीं ऐसा एग्जाम्पल दे जहां मैं सेफ रहूं. मतलब I don't want to say anything against the current government. I was like, अच्छा. So, you know, that is how it works, right? So anyhow, but yeah. So can we proceed? Did you understand? Abu, I will not complain. I will not comment on that. But हाँ, I think you've understood. ठीक है? शांतनु क्या बच्चे? हाँ 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 शांतनु हाँ हाँ. It is continuing. वैभव, अच्छा वैभव knows what is the situation. Actually सब यही पढ़ रहे हैं. हाँ बिल्कुल सही समझा आपने वैभव. चलो let's very quickly continue. कहाँ थे यार हम? So basically we have talked about what were the factors which resulted into evolution, right? That's one thing. Second thing is that if only Britishers were responsible for the evolution of communalism, we would have been able to tackle it post the colonial rule or post our independence. But that did not happen. That means it was not only the Britishers who were responsible for the evolution of communalism, somewhere we were also lacking. So what were those factors? Can you tell me? Can you tell me? Karnataka. Absolutely correct, Kajal. Absolutely correct. Yes. मुद्दे पे तो हम रहना ही नहीं चाहते हैं. With all due respect, see, the problem is not with any one particular party, or I have told you this before also. There was a time when I was upset with certain political leaders or certain political parties that, you know, you are not doing your job, you are not doing your job, and we voted for you and you're not working, you're not in. But after a point of time, I realized they are giving us what we are demanding. Right? If we stop getting affected by our religious differences, if we become more cordial, more peaceful, harmonious towards people of different religious identities, I don't think they would be able to divide us on religious line, ethnic lines, gender lines, caste lines. Somewhere deep down the line, problem lies with us. So they are providing us what we are consuming. If we stop consuming the shit, they will stop providing us that. So that is what I believe. So I think now ultimately the ball is in our court. So we have to be very proactive. That's all I can say. It's high time to stop blaming the political leadership and parties. It's high time. We have only voted for them. So let's not do that. I think it's high time we should blame us of not choosing the right candidate. Okay. So anyhow, is this clear? Okay. So if it was only the British rule, it would have come to an end after a certain point of time, but it didn't happen that way. That means somewhere deep down the line, we were also equally responsible. For example, there were other factors such as the problem with the leadership. Problem with leadership. See, there were different religious organizations which had already emerged during that period. ठीक है, सिख सभा थी, हिंदू महासभा थी, मुस्लिम लीग थी. तो जो हमारी लीडरशिप थी ना, नेशनल लीडरशिप, ऑल्दो दे प्रोजेक्टेड देमसेल्व्स ऑलवेज टू बी सेक्युलर, राइट, दे हैव प्रोजेक्टेड देमसेल्व्स टू बी सेक्युलर, but instead of making direct appeal to the masses, they resorted to policy of negotiation with the leaders of these different religious organizations which have emerged. So they were resorting to the policy of negotiation with the leaders rather than making a direct appeal. As a result, what happened? The masses, they were made to believe there was an acceptance here among the people that their political and economic interests are same. ठीक है, they have to fight against a common foreign rule, they have to work towards a political setup, ठीक है, you have to establish democracy, you have to ensure economic growth. However, socio-culturally they are distinct. ये उनको समझा दिया गया था and they have also accepted this. So there was an implicit acceptance of the fact that they might be sharing common political economic goals, but socio-culturally they are very distinct. Is that very clear? That is the reason that आज भी India is nation in making only. हम नेशन बन नहीं पाए क्योंकि वो कॉमन सेंस ऑफ सोशियो कल्चरल अटैचमेंट कभी आया ही नहीं. Is that very clear? So that is the thing. ठीक है? So write down overthrow of colonial state, overthrow of colonial state, overthrow of colonial state was only a necessary condition to fight communalism, was only a necessary condition to fight communalism, but not sufficient, but not sufficient, but not sufficient, but not sufficient. हाँ वैभव कह सकते हैं. इनफैक्ट लिख सकते हो तुम ब्रिटिशर्स पीरियड में हिंदू एंड मुस्लिम रिवाइवलिस्ट मूवमेंट्स जो थे, तो उसमें प्रोजेलिटाइजेशन भी आप लिख सकते हो. हाँ लिख सकते हो, बिल्कुल लिख सकते हो वैभव. एक पॉइंट और लिख लो यार, हिंदू एंड मुस्लिम रिवाइवलिस्ट मूवमेंट्स. ठीक है. So overthrow of colonial state was only a necessary condition to fight communalism, but not sufficient. Write down the reasons. First reason, failure of national leadership, failure of national leadership to unify, failure of national leadership to unify different sections of society, failure of national leadership to unify different sections of society as it resorted to policy of negotiation, as it resorted to only policy of negotiation with the leaders of different religious organization, rather than making a direct appeal to the masses, As a result, there was an implicit acceptance, that they only share political and economic interest, however, socio-culturally they are distinct. Next, in fact, the Hindu tinge or the Hindu touch which was given to the freedom struggle, Hindu touch was given to nationalist struggle, freedom struggle, it had also generated apprehension among religious minorities. For example, Ganesh festivals, Shivaji festivals, taking dip in Ganga. To mark protest against partition of Bengal. It also generated apprehension among the religious minorities. So the Hindu touch which was given to the nationalist agenda, for example, Ganesh festival, Shivaji festival, taking dip in Ganga, etc., further generated apprehension among the religious minorities, generated apprehension among the religious minorities. Generated apprehension among religious minorities. Then second, after this also can be written, the distorted and communal view of history. Where ancient period was defined as Hindu period and medieval period was defined as Muslim period. Distorted and communal view of history. Glorification of ancient India and undermining of medieval Indian history further generated disenchantment among the educated Muslim class. एक point लिखो. I'll repeat both the points. Distorted and communal view of history, where ancient India was defined as Hindu period and medieval India was defined as Muslim period. Medieval India was defined as Muslim period. ठीक है? In fact, it was written that Indian society and culture reached its peak in ancient period. However, it fell into complete and permanent decay during medieval period because of Muslim domination. Is that very clear? So that is how the history has been written, and that is the trend which has been replicated by various future historians, which also resulted into perpetuation and persistence of communalism in context of India. So once you've written this, ek line mein likho, it was written that Indian culture reached its height in ancient period. Indian society and culture reached its height in ancient period, however, fell into permanent decay in medieval period because of Muslim rule and domination. Because of Muslim rule and domination. In fact, there were various prominent writers who has referred Muslims as foreigners. So again, it has created disenchantment among the religious minorities, that they are not treated as natives. They've been treated as foreigners. So एक line और लिखो. इस पॉइंट को लिखना है लिखो, नहीं लिखना मत लिखो, कोई फर्क नहीं है. एक पॉइंट और लिखो अलग से. Over glorification of ancient Indian history, over glorification or emphasizing ancient Indian history and undermining medieval Indian history had led to disenchantment among educated Muslims, has led to disenchantment among educated Muslims, has led to disenchantment among, oh अच्छा, I'm sorry, अरे फास्ट हो गया, मैंने देखा नहीं तुम लोग का मैसेज, सो सॉरी, मैं दोबारा रिपीट कर रही हूँ. अरे यार एक्चुअली एक जगह खड़े होके ना बोला नहीं जा रहा है, तो वो चलते चलते मुझे लग रहा है मेरी स्पीड फास्ट होती जा रही है। सॉरी 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 सॉरी, मैं दोबारा बोलती हूँ, रुको। आई एम सो सॉरी। लिखो। हिंदू टच, एक बार मैं यहीं से रिपीट कर देती हूँ। हिंदू टच वॉज गिवन टू द नेशनलिस्ट फ्रीडम स्ट्रगल। ठीक है, आई एम एक्सट्रीमली सॉरी। Hindu touch was given to this nationalist freedom struggle, and then I gave you the examples. So obviously it had resulted into apprehension among the religious minorities when Hindu touch was given to the freedom struggle by means of Ganesh festival, Shivaji festival, taking dip in Ganga. So it resulted into aggravating the apprehension among the religious minority. ये पहला पॉइंट जो पेस फास्ट हो गई थी तब का। ठीक है, फिर दूसरा हमने बोला, वी सेड दैट देयर वाज डिस्टॉर्टेड एंड कम्युनल व्यू ऑफ हिस्ट्री. There were various historians. For example, one of British historian was James Mill, right? So there was presenting of a distorted and communal view of history. ठीक है ना, जहां पर it was presented that the ancient period is Hindu period and medieval period is Muslim period. ठीक है, अब सही है, अब दो लाइनें सही हो गई. So the second point is distorted and communal view of history was presented by various historians. For example, James Mill, एक एग्जाम्पल दे दिया. This was the next point that I was saying. The distorted and communal view of history was presented by different historians. For example, there was one British historian, James Mill, who said that ancient period is referred as Hindu period, whereas medieval period is referred as Muslim period. In fact, it was also presented and written that Indian society and culture reached its peak during ancient period. However, it reached its decay, a permanent decay, or it fell into permanent decay in medieval period because of Muslim rule and domination. Is that clear now? Partition of Bengal. That is partition of Bengal. What are you asking? Implicit mechanism, first point. अच्छा, ठीक है, write down. Failure of national leadership, I'll repeat again, failure of national leadership to unify different sections of society, failure of national leadership to unify different sections of society as they were restricted to policy of negotiation, as they were restricted to policy of negotiation with leaders of different religious organization. Policy of negotiation with leaders of different religious organization. Rather than making direct appeal to the masses. This is the first point. I am repeating it for the last time. Now concentrate and write. Failure of national leadership to unify different sections of society as they were restricted to the policy of negotiation, as they were restricted to policy of negotiation with the leaders of different religious organization. Policy of negotiation with leaders of different religious organization rather than making direct appeal to the masses, rather than making direct appeal to the masses. Full stop. As a result, there was an implicit acceptance. As a result, there was an implicit acceptance among the people, implicit acceptance among the people that they have common political and economic interest. They have common political and economic interest. However, they are socio-culturally distinct. However, they are socio-culturally distinct. Then we wrote the third point about this Hindu touch. The fourth point was about this distorted history, and this was written. The fifth point was over-emphasizing or over-glorification of ancient Indian history and undermining of medieval Indian history, over-glorification of ancient Indian history and undermining of medieval Indian history resulted into disenchantment among the educated Muslim community. Resulted into disenchantment among educated Muslim community. Is this clear? Even post-independence, government failed to tackle the menace of communalism, which acted as, or which is acting as a biggest threat to the secular fabric of India. What are the possible reasons? What are the possible reasons why even post-independence government has failed to tackle the problem of communalism? What went wrong? I'm giving you 5 minutes. Give me the points. Vaibhav, in just answering, I just saw your message. अरे इसमें ड्यू रिस्पेक्ट वाली बात नहीं है. ऑफलाइन में धीमे इसलिए पढ़ाती थी ना यार, तुम लोग की शक्ल सामने दिख जाती थी. मैम नहीं लिख पाए, मैम रिपीट, एज सिंपल इज दैट. तो शक्ल से ही दिख जाता था कौन लिख रहा है कौन नहीं लिख रहा है. अभी वो पता नहीं चलता है, ठीक है ना, इसलिए. हाँ, तुम लोग मुझे पॉइंट्स दो, तब तक मैं मैसेजेस देख लेती हूँ. आई थिंक somebody has written something. Shantanu, we are somehow have been socialized in favor of communalism. Okay, ठीक है. हाँ, not exactly communalism. Initially we were, but हाँ ठीक है, we can say that. हाँ ठीक है, not the violent manifestation of communalism, but yes, we are, with respect to believing that since we belong to a particular religious community, we are similar and we are different from others. Absolutely correct. Divyansh, student fighting for hijab versus saffron rather than studying. बच्चे भी क्या करें बेचारे. Shivam, schools fail to educate students with respect to secularism, highly polarized, which is not good. Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, this youth, who is supposedly the children of today's time, who are supposed to act as the founding stone of the success of any nation for that matter, what kind of education, what kind of value system are we developing? Obviously, yeah. Abu, I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay. Are you giving the points? Lack of unity. Unity, बच्चे among the communities. अच्छा, vote bank politics. To remain in power. Not interested in others. अच्छा, ठीक है. Political leaders. Okay. Fill their vote banks. Regional social imbalance. Amit, absolutely correct. हाँ सेजल, absolutely. बिल्कुल, there were Sikh riots, ठीक है. Political will, limited opportunities. Okay. This is the first point. Lack of cultural integration. We are not aware about each other's culture and no effort is even made to ensure cultural integration among people belonging to different religious communities, because of which there is development of a stereotype. Stereotype is a belief system, which I've already told you. Stereotype is a belief system which is irrational. Stereotype, it is a belief which is irrational, which is rigid, which is over generalized. You are looking at everyone from the same lens. That is, if 10 people belong to a religious community, all 10 of them are same. You have overgeneralized. You are overlooking individual differences. That is a stereotype. When your belief system is a stereotype, your attitude becomes a prejudice. Prejudice is a negative attitude. It is a rigid attitude. Prejudice is always intergroup. And when your attitude is prejudice, often your behavior, if not controlled, will have a violent tone to it. So obviously, the religious minorities, in order to safeguard themselves, in order to survive, they are resorting to a technique of invisibility. Don't come in the vision of the dominant section. Otherwise, you would be attacked. So there is always a fear that you would be having a violent attack. So do not come in touch with the mainstream society or the dominant section of the society. So these people resort to a survival technique of invisibility that results into their ghettoization. And the more you are getting ghettoized, again, it will lead to lack of cultural integration. So there exists a vicious cycle. Is that very clear? Is that clear? That's one point. Second point. Next, lack of opportunities for socio-economic development among minorities, which has further resulted into socio-economic disparity among different religious groups. To substantiate this argument, we can refer to Sachar Committee's report or National Sample Survey Office का labor force survey आया था, which have both clearly identified that the economic conditions of Muslims have been very dilapidated. There exists a vicious cycle of poverty among them. तो वो सारे points आप लिख सकते हो, but पहले ये लिख लो. Write this much, then I'll dictate. Absolutely, Pushpendra. Yes. Write down. Such a report, along with NSSO labor force survey, such a report, along with NSSO labor force survey, have highlighted how Muslims constitute the most deprived section. How Muslims constitute the most deprived section, whether it is employment, how Muslims constitute the most deprived section, whether it is employment, education, administration, political representation, etc. Employment, education, administration, political representation, etc. There exists vicious cycle of poverty among them. Vicious cycle of poverty among them. Access to credit is also very low. Access to credit is also very low. The representation among elite positions such as IAS, IPS, is quite less, hardly 3% or 4% respectively. 3% and 4% respectively. You don't need to remember the data, I'm generally saying. And among Muslims, the status of women is further dilapidated because they have least access to education, which anyway has a negative impact on the job prospects. Is this very clear? Is it making sense? Then the next point can be policy of appeasement, which is being resorted to by the political leadership, has also fanned the communal sentiments in the society. Write down in one line. The policy of political appeasement or policy of appeasement followed by the political leadership has also fanned, pankha dena, hawa dena, has also fanned communal sentiments in context of Indian society. For example, how Rajiv Gandhi's government overturned Supreme Court's judgment in Shah Bano case. It was seen as a sign of appeasement of Muslims. That is why Congress was labeled as Muslim appeasement party. ठीक है, just for a reference, हम वैसे भी post independence में we'll study this, but let me just give you a brief reference to it. See, what happened was during that time that Shah Bano, everybody is aware, कुछ सुना होगा Shah Bano judgment के बारे में, that it was with respect to the alimony, the maintenance which would be given to divorced women in Muslim community. So according to their personal law, it has to be given for the period of 3 months after divorce, that is period of idda. ठीक है. However, she approached the court because she was not capable enough to take care of herself. She was not educated. She was married off early. She did not have any employment opportunity, and she also had the responsibility of her kids. There were around 5 kids. Okay? So obviously that was a very challenging situation. So she approached the court, and when she approached the Supreme Court gave the judgment in her favor. So obviously the Muslim group were not very happy with the judgment given by Supreme Court, because it was perceived that the court is interfering in their personal matter. And since Uniform Civil Code has not yet been applied, so they are liable to be governed by their own personal laws in these personal matters. So Supreme Court gave the judgment and said, we are not interfering in your personal matter because this is a criminal offense under section 125 of Code of Criminal Procedure. If you fail to provide maintenance to your divorced wife who's not capable enough to take care of herself, then it would be considered as a criminal offense. And criminal laws are equally applicable to everyone irrespective of their religion. And that is why the court gave the judgment. Then obviously Rajiv Gandhi, there was a lot of pressure which was created on Rajiv Gandhi government. Why? Because Muslim was a major vote bank and the Muslim Orthodox section was dead against this Shah Bano judgment which was given. So as a result, to overturn the judgment, the Muslim Women Divorce Act was passed by Rajiv Gandhi's government. So when Rajiv Gandhi passed this act, so everybody everywhere the opposition parties started labeling Congress as minority appeasement party, as Muslim appeasement party. So again, because of this act of policy of appeasement, there was a divide which was created on religious lines. Is that very clear? But कहानी यहाँ रुकी नहीं थी. कहानी इसलिए नहीं रुकी थी, यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा और आगे जाती हूँ, you will relate to it. Then after that what happened was, obviously Rajiv Gandhi didn't want, लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है, सिर्फ सुनो. So Rajiv Gandhi didn't want his party to be termed as Muslim appeasement party or a minority appeasement party, because at the end of it, it is the Hindu who constitute the majority vote. So he wanted to continue maintaining that image of a secular party. So now he was looking for an opportunity to appease the Hindu voters also. ठीक है ना. तो वो सेक्युलर कैसे करते, तो सोचा कि जहां एक बार माइनॉरिटीज मुस्लिम को अपीस करा है तो अब हिंदू को भी अपीस करें. सो दैट सिचुएशन वाज प्रोवाइडेड. सो बेसिकली देयर वाज फैजाबाद डिस्ट्रिक्ट हाई कोर्ट का जजमेंट आना था, डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट का जजमेंट आना था विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू ओपनिंग द लॉक्स ऑफ बाबरी मस्जिद. ठीक है. अब आपको ये बताना पड़ेगा, यहां सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जजमेंट आप ओवरटर्न कर देते हो. यू रियली थिंक जो वो लोकल सेशन कोर्ट और डिस्ट्रिक्ट कोर्ट होते होंगे उनके जजमेंट पे यू कैन नॉट हैव अ स्टे or you cannot overturn the judgment? Obviously you could have done all of that, but obviously you didn't have that intention. So when the court judgment came, it said that the locks of Babri Masjid should be open for the Hindus to worship, as it is the birthplace of Lord Ram. The moment that judgment came, actually, I'm not questioning the judgment. I am questioning the political leadership of that time who made use of religion to play their politics. The moment the judgment came, first of all, the entire judgment was advertised. और उस टाइम पे तो भैया इतना मीडिया नहीं था, दूरदर्शन था केवल. So दूरदर्शन was present, अपनी सैटेलाइट वगैरह वो सब लेकर to public to publish that entire judgment which came, which allowed Hindus now to enter the vicinity of Babri Masjid, which is the main birthplace of Lord Ram, and start worshipping. Within half an hour, the judgment was implemented. Is that very clear? So can you see, irrespective of the political party, every political party, it's not about just the current government, every political party has used religion to their personal interest, has used religion to play their politics. So politics or policy of appeasement has also fanned the sentiments, the communal sentiments which are existing in our society today. Is that very clear? In fact, not only that, they have resorted to divisive politics. How religion is used as a tool to divide people and further their vote bank. Is that clear? So yeah, political factors are equally important. In fact, political manipulation has led to persistence of communalism in context of India. So it is finally, based on both these points, you can say it is the political manipulation which has led to persistence of communalism in India. Why Supreme Court didn't declare the law to be unconstitutional? It didn't declare, बच्चे शांतनु, because see, ultimately law making is not the job of the judiciary. और जो लॉ बना था वो मैं बता देती हूँ. लॉ में एक लाइन लिखी हुई थी inverted commas, fair and reasonable amount should be decided and given within it the period. Just I'm diverting from the topic just to answer him. It was written in the act, fair and reasonable amount should be decided and given within this was the key word here. Actually, the purpose of the law was to overturn the judgment. ठीक है? So it was said that fair and reasonable amount should be decided and given within 3 months. That was the act. So it was to give an impression that look, we have overturned the judgment. However, the court also did not interfere. अब जैसे कोर्ट ने बोला ट्रिपल तलाक को बैन कर दो, हो गया, लेकिन हमने तो उसे क्रिमिनलाइज कर दिया लॉ पास करके. Court only said to ban, right? But we have criminalized it. They said null and void declare करो, बात खत्म. But हमने criminalize कर दिया उस offense को, right? So their work is to give us the direction in which the law has to be made. Ultimately, law making is the job of the political leadership, which has been done. Is that clear? ठीक है ना? So it was written a fair and reasonable amount should be decided and given within it the period. यानी 3 महीने के अंदर दो. कहीं पे भी ये लिखा है कि it should be given for 90 days. It is written it should be given within 90 days. Nowhere it is written it should be given for 90 days. So again this issue was raised in another case, Daniel Latifi case, okay, in which Supreme Court upheld that the judgment which was given in Shah Bano case still holds validity. Because in this act, the wording is such that a fair and reasonable amount should be decided and given within 90 days. It is not written, it should be given for 90 days. So again, this issue was raised in Daniel Latifi case, and in which it was held that the judgment given in Shah Bano is absolutely upheld. Is that very clear? Is this clear? Is it making sense? तो यार लीडरशिप पे डिपेंड करता है. लॉ मेकिंग इज फाइनली द जॉब ऑफ द पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप, राइट? इट इज नॉट द जॉब ऑफ द जुडिशरी. फिर आप कहोगे जुडिशरी ने ओवर रीच कर दिया. इज दिस वेरी क्लियर? इज इट मेकिंग सेंस? ठीक है. एनी हाउ, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. द नेगेटिव रोल ऑफ सोशल मीडिया. नेगेटिव रोल ऑफ सोशल मीडिया. एक तो सोशल मीडिया ने बहुत से आप पे डाले हुए हैं. Not only social media, in general. Why negative role of social media? Why only blame social media? In general, media. ठीक है? In the name of sensationalization of news. So write down, communal nature of media has also resulted into, कुछ भी point लिख सकते हो. अब याद आ रहा है इसलिए बोलती जा रही हूँ. फिर बोलोगे मैम का स्पीड फास्ट हो गया. Communal nature of media, how in name of sensationalization of news, they are communalizing the content. लिखो. How in name of sensationalization of news or sensational journalism, कुछ भी इस तरह से लिखकर, sensationalization of news, they are communalizing the content. Sometimes rumor is presented as news. Sometimes rumor is presented as news. और आज तो कमाल ही हो गया आज का मीडिया. They are using WhatsApp messages as the source of the content of their prime time news. Nothing can be more disgraceful for media as an institution that the main anchors of prime time news are resorting to WhatsApp chats and messages for the source of their news. तो और क्या होगा? यही होगा फिर, divide among people on religious lines. or primordial identities, right? So it is not only social media. Social media, तो definitely, obviously faster dissemination of polarized views are happening. There is lack of regulation of social media. तो ये सारी चीजें डिक्टेट करने की नहीं है, ये याद आती जा रही है तो बोलती जा रही हूं. आप लोग अपना पॉइंट्स लिखो. एक ही पॉइंट है, नेगेटिव रोल ऑफ सोशल मीडिया and with respect to print media or TV media, you can talk about how in the name of sensational journalism, they are communalizing the content. How rumors are presented as news. ठीक है, without any authentication. For example, 1969 का अहमदाबाद riots हुए थे. So the headline was that there is a report of attack on Hindu temples. And that was the headline, that there is a report that there have been an attack on Hindu temples. And because of this headline, the Ahmedabad riots took place in 1969. However, that was just a rumor. However, the person who printed the news did not bother to cross-check the veracity of the news. And it was the rumor which was presented as the news. So it also, most importantly, 2013 के मुजफ्फरनगर riots, एक Facebook पे एक post आया था that a boy has eve teased a girl. But this was not the post. The post was a boy belonging to this religious community has eve teased a girl belonging to this religious community. Now, do I need to say anything further? So an act of eve teasing, which in itself is a wrong act, but it should have been addressed at that level. But because you had posted in a capacity that a particular religious community boy has eve teased a particular religious community girl, it resulted into riot. रात भर में riot हो गए. So that is the negative role of media as well as social media, to be very precise. Because social media, the speed at which these rumors are getting disseminated is very fast. In fact, it has become the platform for certain fringe elements in the society to satisfy their religious agendas, the fundamentalist agendas. Is this very clear for everyone? Is it making sense? ठीक है. Now, एक आध point और लिखो. Feeling of relative deprivation, feeling of relative deprivation, feeling of relative deprivation has also fueled the communal sentiments. 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 Is this very clear? Clear है? ठीक है? एक और चीज, do you understand that when you are resorting to the survival technique of invisibility, that's also because there is a psychological factor which comes into place. There is a fear, there is a threat, there is an antagonistic fervor which has been generated among people of different religious communities. So that is what it is happening. So it is no longer the historical factor, no longer just the political factor, no longer just the economic factor or the failure of administration, laxity on the part of administration to address the issues of communal violence. No longer it is just these factors. There are other more important factors, and that is the psychological factor. There is a psychological, attitudinal problem which has been given rise to communalism and which is responsible for perpetuation of communalism in the current times. Is that clear? एक psychological divide आ गया है among people of different communities. There is a perception of fear, there is a perception of threat, there is perception of antagonism towards each other. You don't want to see at each other. You don't want to make that eye-to-eye contact because you believe that you are very different from each other. So there is a psychological inertia which is being created. So that is stopping you from intermingling with people of other religious faith. Is that very clear? And this is very important. No matter how good your infrastructure is, no matter how good your law is, no matter how well your political leadership and administration is working, if people are not ready to intermingle with each other, nothing can work. And if people are ready to intermingle with each other, nothing can result into communal distress or violence. Is this very clear for everyone? तो बस एक point और लिखो. एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव फेलियर हमने लिखा था क्या? लैक्सिटी ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. एक पॉइंट और लिखो, लैक्सिटी ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, laxity on the part of administration to cripple the capacity of communal outfits organization. Laxity on the part of administration to cripple the capacity of communal outfits to disrupt law and order. टू डिसरप्ट लॉ एंड ऑर्डर. आपके एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में वो पावर ही नहीं है, वो कैपेसिटी नहीं है, वो प्रोएक्टिवनेस ही नहीं है. So laxity on the part of administration to cripple the capacity of communal outfits to disrupt law and order. Training ही नहीं है. In fact, Ranganath Mishra committee says that it is the police who's responsible for maximum partisan attitude towards religious minorities. They have the most prejudiced and biased attitude. And in most of the riots which have broken, it has been seen that police have been indulged in the biased or the prejudiced attitude. And ये हम नहीं कह रहे. Ranganath Mishra committee report is saying that the maximum amount of violence or abuse has been done by the police officials themselves. लिख लो एक लाइन में. According to Ranganath Mishra committee report, often it is the police officials who are responsible, for biased attitude against religious minorities. There is someone who wrote हिस्ट्री ऑफ, किसी ने लिखा था एक पॉइंट, एक सेकंड रुकना यार. देयर इज समवन हु रोट अ पॉइंट. हेट स्पीच बिल्कुल लिख सकते हैं. किसका पॉइंट है ये? अभिषेक. हेट स्पीचेस बिल्कुल ये सब लिख सकते हो. ऑब्वियसली यू आर फैनिंग द सेंटिमेंट्स ऑफ वन पर्सन अगेन. अच्छा हाँ, एक फियर साइकोसिस क्यों आ रहा है रिलीजियस माइनॉरिटीज में? बिकॉज ऑफ वाइकेरियस री इन्फोर्समेंट ऑफ द कम्युनल पीपल. वाइकेरियस रीइंफोर्समेंट मैंने बताया था ना आपको एक बार कि व्हेन यू रिवॉर्ड समवन in public domain, then people have a tendency of replicating that behavior, right? So vicarious reinforcement of communal people also generates fear psychosis among religious minorities. एक डर बैठ जाता है. That Shah Rukh Khan news, absolutely. बुल्ली बाई केस, एब्सोल्युटली करेक्ट, एब्सोल्युटली. तबलीगी जमात स्केप गोटिंग, एब्सोल्युटली करेक्ट. है शांतनु. ओके. बिल्कुल बिल्कुल अबू, एब्सोल्युटली करेक्ट. शिवम, we'll discuss UCC later. फियर साइकोसिस, अब फियर जनरेट हो जाता है, फियर साइकोलॉजी डेवलप हो जाती है। अच्छा सॉरी, विजिबल नहीं है क्या, सॉरी सॉरी, फियर साइकोसिस अब विजिबल है। एक डर बैठ जाता है मन में, दैट, अब ठीक है ना। मैंने देखा नहीं था, सॉरी, आई रिपीट, वाइकेरियस री इन्फोर्समेंट ऑफ कम्युनल पीपल, vicarious reinforcement of communal people also generates fear psychosis among different religious groups. ठीक है? Is this clear for everyone? क्या करें? अच्छा, क्या करने से पहले एक बार रिलीजियस फंडामेंटलिज्म डिस्कस कर लेते हैं, फिर डिस्कस करेंगे क्या करें, ठीक है? Because religious fundamentalism is a violent offshoot of communalism. So let's first discuss religious fundamentalism and then we'll discuss about these points. ठीक है? इनफैक्ट ये जो पोलराइजेशन, समझ नहीं आया, कहां था पॉइंट? ओके, देर आर फ्यू पीपल, विदाउट नेमिंग, आप वहां पे कुछ भी लिख सकते हो, आई कांट से, ठीक है? देर आर फ्यू पीपल हु एवरी नाउ एंड देन मेक वेरी कम्युनली कलर्ड रिमार्क्स, ठीक है? दे आर द वन, you know, they are giving literally hate speeches everywhere. They are in fact inciting violence on religious lines. Despite that, if they are giving, or if they are being given a very lucrative position in party, political party, or they are being given ministerial position, right, or they are being given some other incentives, or they are being awarded Padma Shri, okay, or any other such awards, what a common man is getting impression that the authority of your country is acknowledging them despite these hate speeches, despite these religiously colored remarks, despite inciting violence. आप लोग वहां कुछ भी लिखिए, that I don't care. I am generally making a very normal statement. ठीक है? So despite all of this, if yet still you are being awarded, what impact it is going to have on a psyche of common man? ऐसा करने पर हमारा भी फायदा होगा. Let's do this. This is what the authority wants us to do. Vicarious reinforcement. Wahin par, in the place of this, Sameem, if an honest person is rewarded, if a courageous person is awarded, if a person who has done immense social work, right, who has actually helped a lot of migrants moving from one place to another during this COVID pandemic, if that person would have been awarded, फिर, लेकिन ऐसे लोगों की आप आईटी रेड हो जाती है, तो फॉर अ कॉमन मैन व्हाट काइंड ऑफ इंप्रेशन आर यू गेटिंग? यू आर गेटिंग एन इंप्रेशन कि इफ यू डू दिस तब आईटी रेड, बट इफ यू डू दिस देन पद्मश्री. सो कैन यू सी द डिफरेंस? Vicarious reinforcement. I'm just giving you an example. No, any resemblance to any person in reality, it can be purely coincidental. I'm just giving you a example to explain, Sameem. I hope you understood. Is that very clear? Can we proceed? Religious fundamentalism. Religious fundamentalism. ठीक है? Concept of religious fundamentalism, rationale behind religious fundamentalism, and causes. We have to study religious fundamentalism from these perspectives, क्योंकि the way forward would remain the same. So that is why I said that way forward I'll take in the end. यहां से दिख रहा है ना आप लोग को? It is visible from here. No, it is not visible. Wait. It is visible from here. ठीक है? It's a violent offshoot of communalism. It's a violent offshoot of communalism by which few self-styled true believers. Vaibhav, violent offshoot of communalism according to which self-styled true believers tries to arrest the erosion of religious identity, tries to arrest the erosion of religious identities. It is a violent offshoot of communalism according to which self-styled true believers tries to arrest the erosion of rare religious identities. The rationale behind religious fundamentalism is एक सेकंड कहां तक दिख रहा है रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी एंड प्रैक्टिसेस नहीं दिख रहा है एक सेकंड यार एक मिनट बस हाँ वैभव वी कैन से दिस religious fundamentalism, violent offshoot of communalism according to which self-styled true believers tries to arrest the erosion of religious identity. It is based on the rationale, the concept of fundamentalism, that these people believe that because of modernization, remember progressive transformation of various aspects of life, first lecture of society, and secularization. Secularization matlab when social significance of religion declines. Okay, so because of decline in social significance of religion and modernization, the world around them has changed so much that it is acting as a threat to their ability to protect and preserve their religious identity and practices. इसीलिए they are resorting to religious fundamentalism. And please remember, communalism may not always be a threat to national integration, but fundamentalism is definitely a threat to national integration because it is a violent offshoot. And who are the one who practice religious fundamentalism? They are the self-styled, खुद को मान लेते हैं that they are the karta dhartas of their religion. They themselves take on the responsibility to preserve the traditional culture and practices of their religion. And irony is, many of the time they don't even know what is their traditional culture and practices. Is that very clear? तो बस केवल एक पर्टिकुलर सिंबल पहन लेने से यू डोंट बिकम द practitioner of that particular religion. You should know the nuance, the core ideology of your religion, which though you have WhatsApp anyway. So WhatsApp has become the source of religious gyan nowadays. So anyhow, so self-styled, खुद ही को ये जिम्मेदारी दे दी that I have taken on to myself the responsibility to take care of my religion, which I only believe is on decline. खुद ही ने मान लिया that because of modernization, because of secularization, the world or the society around me has changed so much that it is acting as a threat. देखो word भी बड़े अच्छे से चुनते हैं. It is acting as a threat to my ability to protect my religion as well as to preserve its identity and practices. So now I am resorting to fundamentalist activities. That is nothing but violent offshoot. Absolutely hate speeches. Absolutely. Yes, you can say this. Is that very clear? So, if you look at the rationale, one thing is obvious that if कुछ और है क्या? हाँ, बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल, absolutely. If you are inciting violence against another religious groups, right, so as to protect your religious identity, it is fundamentalist in nature. Is that very clear? ठीक है. And why are, see, fundamentalism में एक बात आपको ध्यान देनी है that they are asking you to go back to the fundamentals of your religion without even realizing what is the fundamental of your religion. Every religion talks about non-violence. Every religion talks about honesty. It talks about truth. It talks about universal brotherhood. It talks about social justice, welfare. Which religion doesn't talk about these things? Every religion without fail talks about these things. But the irony is, हम customize कर लेते हैं अपनी understanding of religion so as to suit our vested interest. Is that very clear? Can we? Absolutely, yes. Can we talk about the causes? बिल्कुल कह सकते हो. Yes, Sejal. Can we talk about the causes? So one thing quite obvious from the rationale is that the first cause is modernization. The second cause is secularization. In one line, if you want to understand secularization, just write social significance of religion has declined. Social significance of religion has declined. Matlab, the value of religion in your everyday life has declined. जैसे नहीं होता है कि अब the rituals, the religious rituals not being observed during marriage, ठीक है, पैसा खिलाए आधे घंटे में मैरिज करो, कोर्ट मैरिज का कॉन्सेप्ट आ गया है, ठीक है, तो marriage is no longer considered as sacred, then caste system is no longer being observed, ठीक है, intercaste marriages हो रही हैं, intercaste dining हो रही है, so कहीं ना कहीं it is perceived that the religious significance has been declined, ठीक है. Going back to the fundamentals of the religion, that is another concept, right? But if you read the definition of religious fundamentalism, what did I make you write? Violent offshoot of communalism. Asking someone to go back to the fundamentals is absolutely different. But when I'm talking about that violent offshoot of communalism, according to which some self-styled true believers tries to arrest the erosion of religious identity, anything which has a violent offshoot, can it be considered as progressive? Read the definition. That is why I said fundamentalist hona alag hai or fundamentalism as a concept is different. So asking someone to go back to the fundamentals of religion, that is why I made a point there, going back to the fundamentals without even realizing what the fundamentals of that religion are. Is this very clear? ठीक है ना? So causes modernization, secularization. ठीक है, they are one of the cause, as in these two causes are there. However, apart from that, there are more specific causes which one can refer to. The first thing is see, modernization and secularization, they are given factors that if these factors are there, somewhere deep down the line, fundamentalism will emerge. Fundamentalism in the capacity of as a violent offshoot of communalism, right? However, that is only one of the factor. There is a need of presence of another important set of factors for religious fundamentalism to emerge. First and foremost, there should be ideological cohesion. Now, you need to be united on the basis of some common ideology. Do you realize? Just try to understand. It is nothing against what is happening. एक concept है, ठीक है, उसको समझो. The concept of Ram Mandir which emerged, one of the objective was also to unite different Hindus or the different people within Hinduism on one common ideological line. For example, it was being perceived that within Hinduism also there are so many gods. Some worship Ram, some worship Hanuman, some worship Durga, some worship Shiv, some worship Vishnu. Take it. Some worship, Kali for that matter. So there are different manifestation of God who are existing within Hinduism. Okay. Even if you are worshipping Krishna, so there are different avatars of Lord Krishna that one is worshipping. So people were divided within Hinduism. So there was a need to bring them on one tangent, to bring them on one platform. And that is the role which has been done by this issue of Ram Mandir. So whether you personally worship Lord Ram within your household or not, but that issue of Ram Mandir has united everyone within Hindu community. Is that very clear? So there is a need for ideological cohesion. There has to be a common sacred text which was missing in our context. As in, one common sacred ideology was missing. There are some people who are following a particular context, some people are following a particular god. So there was too much of division which was existing. So this concept of Ram Mandir had united everyone. This example is just to make you understand this concept of ideological cohesion. Rest, you don't have to write this, but this is for you to understand that how this ideological cohesion is very much required. Only then these fundamentalist tendencies would emerge. Otherwise, it will not emerge. That's for sure. Is that very clear? ठीक है. फंडामेंटलिज्म के लिए एक सफिशिएंट कंडीशन आइडियोलॉजिकल कोहेजन होती है. ठीक है, तो होनी चाहिए. तो इट fastens the process of emergence of fundamentalism in case there is ideological cohesion. Let me put it this way. Is that very clear? Okay. So, for example, if you want to write something, you can write presence of common sacred religious text. Presence of common sacred religious text. ठीक है ना? Is that clear? See? Then second, there is very much need of supply of potential recruits. What do I mean by potential recruits is there has to be availability of relatively deprived people. Just imagine if you are doing well for yourself in your personal and professional life, right? You're well settled, you're doing a good job, decent income you are earning, your personal life is also going fine, then it is very difficult to manipulate you on religious lines. You have to feel deprived, only then you will be made to believe that religion is opium of masses. यही मार्क्स ने कहा है ना, रिलीजन आपको दुख सहने की क्षमता देता है, फियर जनरेट किया जाएगा आपके अंदर. देखो, द वर्ल्ड हैज चेंज सो मच, दैट इज व्हाई यू आर सफरिंग, द गॉड इज एंग्री विथ यू, यू हैव टू रिवाइव योर कल्चर, यू हैव टू रिवाइव योर रिलीजन इज अंडर डिस्ट्रेस. This fear is being generated. When you will be made to manipulate on religious lines, you will be radicalized only on the grounds when you are not happy in your life. If you are content, if you are happy, if you are satisfied, and I ask you, come tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we have to mob lynch someone. Will you come? You are doing a good job. You are into that 9 to 5 job. You are doing something well for yourself. You are educated. You are aware. Will you give your time for mob lynching someone on some rumored aspect? Will you do that? No, you will not. So how would I manipulate you, radicalize you on religious lines when you are not happy and content in your life? Because देखो, मानो या नहीं मानो, बहुत कम ही समय ऐसा होता है जब भगवान को हम सच्चे मन से याद करते हैं, जब सब कुछ सही चल रहा होता है. भगवान की याद आती ही तब है जब कहीं कुछ दिक्कत होती है, रिजल्ट आने वाला है, प्लीज भगवान जी इस बार बचा लेना, कुछ गड़बड़ हो गया, प्लीज भगवान जी इस बार बचा लेना. अभी तो आप लोगों ने एक्सपीरियंस नहीं किया, भगवान न करे यू हैव टू एक्सपीरियंस, बट व्हेन यू स्टे इन दिस यूपीएससी फील्ड फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्गर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम, आई हैव सीन पीपल कीपिंग फास्ट फॉर सैटरडेज, फॉर ट्यूजडेज, फॉर थर्सडेज, जस्ट टू क्लियर दिस एग्जाम. दे हैव बीन विजिटिंग लॉट ऑफ एस्ट्रोलॉजर्स, वेयरिंग ऑल सॉर्ट ऑफ रिंग्स एंड एवरीथिंग. व्हाई? टू क्लियर दिस एग्जाम. Because you want every possible factor to work in your favor. And trust me, we are most thankless people. So if everything is going good for us, so the maximum thing is thank you God for everything. But when we are not having every possible, facilities, and when we are lacking in one or the other way, we tend to remember God. Please बचा लेना भगवान, इस बार ये ठीक करा लो, इस बार ये करवा दो, ये काम, ये टेंडर पास करवा दो, ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट दिलवा दो, इस बार मैंने करप्शन करवा दिया, इस बार बचा लो, अगली बार नहीं करूंगा. Are you getting the point? Right? So you look up to God when you are deprived in some or the other way. You feel deprived. You might not be deprived in real sense, but there is a feeling of deprivation. तभी मैंने relative deprived word लिखा है. You can feel deprived in any which way. Maybe you are educated, you're doing very well for yourself, but then you feel deprived. You are relatively feeling deprived. That people of your community should have done well, but they are not doing well because the people of other community have taken all the resources. अब खुद को तो आप कैसे भी deprived feel कर सकते हो ना. That is why the term used here is relative deprivation. So there has to be a supply of these potential recruits, supply of those people who feel themselves to be relatively deprived. Then it is easier for us to manipulate them on religious lines, because then religion becomes the opium of masses. Is that clear? ओ बाबा, कोई जन्नत का तालिब है, कोई गम से परेशान है, जरूरत सजदा करवाती है, इबादत कौन करता है. ओफो. ओके. Yeah. So did you get the point? Supply of potential recruits. ठीक है? Is this clear? See? Is this clear for everyone? Sanjay, yeah, very well written. ठीक है? So Vaibhav, Sanjay, we understood the point. ठीक? So next, charismatic leadership. See, it's very important to have a charismatic leader. Only that person can make you do something which can be highly destructive in nature also. And whichever field. Do you understand what is charisma? Charisma is something in which you put that leader at altogether a different pedestal. Hitler, he was a charismatic leader. People blindly followed his orders. Why? Because of his charisma. And trust me, this charisma has nothing to do or nothing major to do with that individual leader. It is more to do with the perception of the followers. We perceive that that particular individual has that superhuman qualities, and because of which we have placed that individual at a higher pedestal, and in that position when he even gives us the most destructive order, we don't shy away in fulfilling those orders. That's the power of charismatic leadership. So when you have that charismatic leadership present there, you would not shy away, you would not refrain yourself from giving effect to the most destructive orders इन द सोसाइटी. इनफैक्ट जब हम एथिक्स पढ़ेंगे तो एक एक्सपेरिमेंट है, स्टैनली मिलग्राम का एक्सपेरिमेंट, जो यही कहता है दैट वी हैव बीन सोशलाइज्ड इन सच अ वे दैट वी विल ऑलवेज ओबे द ऑर्डर्स ऑफ द अथॉरिटी, एंड इफ दैट अथॉरिटी इज कैरिज्मेटिक देन तो देयर इज नो डाउट अबाउट इट. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? तो हम डिस्ट्रक्टिव ऑर्डर्स भी मान लेते हैं. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? ठीक है. Is this clear for everyone? So that is charismatic personality or the leadership. इसमें कुछ लिखना नहीं है, ठीक है? This is just for your understanding, ठीक? Then obviously, information communication technology, social media, faster dissemination of your radical ideas. It makes the dissemination of your ideas at such a faster pace that whatever fundamentalist ideas you are getting at one end, it is getting disseminated at a very faster pace to the other parts of the society or your community. Is this very clear? So that is the role of communication and technology. And finally, I know you must be wondering, why did I write secular education? The more secular your education is, the more you start questioning the regressive practices in your religious communities. The more you start questioning the regressive practices in your community, the more it challenges the authority of the orthodox section in your religious community. Is that clear? So they want to preserve their hegemony, and that is why they resort to fundamentalism. I'll write it down for you. Secular education, as a result, you question the regressive practices. As a result, it threatens the hegemony of the orthodox section. As a result, this orthodox section, they resort to religious fundamentalism. Is that very clear? Is that very clear? Clear है? ठीक है, एक क्वेश्चन लिखो. Write down. Aditya, I will not answer the question. I will not answer the question, to be very honest. ठीक है, let's not get down to that line. We will not answer the question. It can become controversial. I would not. What about Karnataka hijab issue? Sanjay, what about the issue? As in what context? The issue is still there? It is still there? What about the issue? Again, it will become very controversial. See, if I have to answer that, our secularism allows this. Our secularism is different from secularism which is practiced in France. So our secularism is okay with this. But if certain leadership, obviously, no matter what ideology you have, it depends upon the leader how that ideology is being practiced. If certain leadership is not okay with it, they are definitely whatever. Is that clear? ठीक है? Can we proceed? Write down a question. What do you mean by religious fundamentalism? What do you mean by religious fundamentalism? Discuss the factors responsible for its emergence, for its emergence, for its emergence, for its emergence. See, Sanjay, again, I'll just reiterate in one line. I hope you understand. हम सेक्युलरिज्म जब बात करेंगे तो हम करेंगे, लेकिन सिर्फ उस बात के लिए बता देती हूँ, आर सेक्युलरिज्म अलाउज इट. ठीक है ना? द मैनर इन विच सेक्युलरिज्म इज प्रैक्टिस्ड, वी डू नॉट हैव एनी प्रॉब्लम विद ओवर्ट एक्सप्रेशन ऑफ योर रिलीजियस सिंबल्स इन पब्लिक प्लेसेस, because we accept the fact that we are religiously diverse. That was the rationale, and we wanted to provide equal respect to all religion, right? So any overt expression of your religious identity in the form of religious symbols is absolutely allowed in our society. Whereas if this would have been France, right? So France may overt expression of your religious symbols are not allowed in public sphere. So whether it is a public school, public office, public space, but that's not the case in context of India, right? So Indian secularism allows this. That is all what I want to say. Is that very clear? And we will not get into anything which is very controversial. Trust me, it nowadays I am so conscious about what I am discussing in the lecture that when I had to explain you ideological cohesion, giving example of Ram Mandir, it was very difficult. You have just no clue what we have to go through. पता है, I know many of you might be very accommodative, very open with respect to your ideology. There are many of you who might believe that construction of Ram Mandir is good, which is absolutely correct also. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. But then in a democratic setup, everybody should be allowed to put forward their opinion, right? But nowadays, we have to be slightly conscious because there are many of us, many students, many of us in general, which are not very accommodative of diverse opinions or dissent opinions. So we have to be conscious, right? We have to be very particular. I know that doesn't suit the stature of a teacher to be conscious, but then you can't help it. That is the instruction which we get, right? That you don't have to say anything which is sensitive. और बताओ, पढ़ाना कम्युनलिज्म है, सेक्युलरिज्म है, और सेंसिटिव इश्यूज पे हम बात नहीं कर सकते. बट एनी हाउ, इतना संभल संभल के पढ़ाने में हालत खराब हो जाती है. इज दिस वेरी क्लियर? ठीक है? It is clear? Okay, can we proceed now? Write down. With respect to incidences, with respect to incidences, with respect to incidences or growing incidences, with respect to growing incidences of communal violence in India, with respect to growing incidences of communal violence in India, with respect to growing incidences of communal violence in India, suggest few measures to tackle the menace. Suggest few measures to tackle the menace. Suggest few measures to tackle the menace. You have 5 minutes. Give me the points. Suggest few measures to tackle the menace. try to provide the arguments in this capacity. Short-term measure and long-term measure. I think we have discussed this once, that how the way forward can be written. Now, give me arguments as short-term and long-term. Give me the arguments with respect to short-term and long-term. Take your time. Take 5 minutes and answer. अंशुल, ओके, ठीक है. बिल्कुल रवि, आई टोटली अग्री टू दिस. खाली दिमाग शैतान का घर. Okay. Lot of people have answered. Okay, Sameen, I'll start with you. Regulation of media. But media itself is a watchdog. Okay? So, suggesting regulation of media again becomes a challenge. Then the agency which is regulating the media, who will regulate that? Media itself was supposed to act like a watchdog. But I totally understood your point that you want to say that obviously the media which in name of sensationalization of the news are resorting to communal thing, or even the media houses have become communal in nature. So that needs to, so communalization of media needs to be checked. That is what you meant. ठीक है. Then change in value system. Fine. How would you ensure change in value system? Vote bank politics ban. Okay. Electoral reforms. Religion should not be used as a basis. Okay. I think Sameem also meant the same thing. With violent communal identity, Ravi. Absolutely correct. Strict laws for mob lynching. Provide more employment opportunities. State to keep a distance from all religious activities in the country. It was supposed to be actually principal distance, but anyhow. The politicians who are using religion for cancel the, I think it's the same thing, electoral reforms. Okay? UCC needs to be implemented. Acha bache, that starts altogether a different debate. Okay? So we'll restrict from using this point. We'll use some other point. Promote secular education, job opportunity. Abhishek, perfect. Awareness about schemes which are benefiting every section. Promote secularism. Control over media. Abu, this point I will not agree to. Again, you know, I've already given the reason, but first and third point, I'll agree with this. Okay, Anshul has given us a detailed argument that like-minded people should come forward to bring about the change by sensitizing the people. Absolutely correct. So create job opportunities, constructive work may, checks and balance. Civil society, absolutely. Absolutely, civil society and NGOs have to play a proactive role. Eminent personalities from every religion, promoting fraternity and compassion. Abhishek, I think this point is also by Anshul. So we'll combine these 2 points. Absolutely correct. हाँ Sujata, ये okay, ठीक है. I think it's the same point we are talking about. Media have to fuss on value creation in the society map, not only focus on the value creation, not only TRP making, Anshul. Responsible journalism, restrained journalism needs to be promoted. Media ethics needs to be further established. Absolutely correct, Abu. We'll take all these points. Fine, Shantanu. ठीक है, I got the point. More or less we are writing these points. Fine, absolutely correct. Write down. with respect to short-term measures, setting up of peace communities. Write down, setting up of peace communities. Setting up of peace communities. Responsible and restrained journalism. Setting up of peace communities. Responsible and restrained journalism. Second point, responsible and restrained journalism. Responsible and restrained journalism. Active participation of NGOs and civil society to drive away the mistrust between different religious communities. Active participation of NGOs and civil society to drive away the mistrust between different religious community. Use of different cultural platforms. Use of different cultural platforms to facilitate peace and harmony between different religious communities. Use of various cultural platforms. Cinema can be used, theater can be used, media can be used. So use of various cultural platforms to facilitate peace and harmony between different religious communities. यहां पे लिख दूं बचा हुआ पॉइंट, extremist communal outfits should be immediately targeted. It is very important to have a prompt response. Otherwise, जब तक आप respond करोगे, तब तक act of violence will have already taken place. And I think one of you mentioned history of communal riots in that particular area is also responsible for incidences of communal violence, because there is always a spillover effect, a domino effect is there. Okay? Sometimes an incident at one place, if not tackled properly, it encourages that deviant tendency or a riot kind of a situation in other places. So there is a domino effect, there is a spillover effect. So that is why extremist communal outfits should be immediately targeted and their capacity to cripple the law and order should be disrupted. Extremist communal outfits should be immediately targeted and their capacity to cripple law and order should be disrupted. Should be disrupted. Is that clear? Then we have time and again been talking about how police is responsible. Okay, so there should be proper training should be given. Sometimes police officials, administration is incapable of addressing the crisis. In fact, there was various cases of communal violence which has happened in India in past. The reason was the administrative officer of that region did not have the proper expertise, training or even experience to handle the situation of communal violence, which anyway is a very sensitive issue. So keeping that in mind, you can write codification of the guidelines, codification of guidelines for administrative officials, codification of guidelines for administrative officials, सब short term में ही आएगा, codification of guidelines for administrative officials and proper training for police, proper training for police to handle communal riots, proper training for police to handle communal riots. Sensitization of different officials or stakeholders, sensitization of different stakeholders with respect to religious minorities, sensitization of different stakeholders with respect to religious minorities. Electoral reforms, reform in criminal justice system, reform in criminal justice system. For example, speedy trial होना, fast track court होना, adequate compensation देना, वो सब. So reform in criminal justice system is the need of the hour. ये सब short term में आएगा. अब बहुत हो गया. Short term as in which you know which can be implemented. The time and again the need is there with respect to electoral reforms. Time and again we've been talking about reforms in criminal justice system. So whether it is to increase the infrastructure or to ensure speedy trials or to ensure certainty with respect to the judgment or to ensure adequate compensation, this is not something which is new or which will take long time. In case you don't have a will. If you don't have a will, it might take time, otherwise not. So yeah, reform, electoral reforms, reforms in criminal justice system is the need of the hour. Adequate representation of minorities in different law enforcement agencies. Adequate representation of minorities in different law enforcement agencies. ठीक है? Address the problem of poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, value-based education without any ideological coloration. Any kind of communal press should be banned. मतलब strict action against communal press. So communal press needs to be discouraged. Communal press needs to be discouraged. Communalization of elites, political elites, also needs to be checked. If you know your political leadership is communal in nature, immediate action needs to be taken against them. So communalization of political elites needs to be checked. सब long term में लिखना, मेरे पास जगह नहीं है यहाँ पे, आप लिखो. Communalization of political elites needs to be checked. Socialization of children with respect to socialization of younger generation or children with respect to values of tolerance, peace, harmony, scientific temper needs to be ensured by different agencies. I'll repeat, socialization of children with respect to value system of peace, harmony, tolerance, scientific temper needs to be developed or ensured by different agencies of socialization. By different agencies of socialization. Is that very clear? Is it making sense for everyone? ठीक है. और जब हम वर्ड, अगर आपको कहीं पे भी बहुत ज्यादा एजेंसीज को इनकॉर्पोरेट करना हो तो आप स्टेक होल्डर वर्ड डाल सकते हो. तो उसमें एवरीवन हु हैज अ स्टेक इज इनकॉर्पोरेटेड अंडर दैट. इज दैट क्लियर? ठीक है. Do we need to write something else? Naming and shaming. Okay. I think more or less we've written everything. Let me see if there is anything else that needs to be written. Promote more unbiased attitude towards religious issues. Media to promote. हाँ ठीक है. Responsible and restrained journalism. Communal press should be banned. Unbiased police action. That is why we said proper training should be given. Proper sensitization should be there. Proper guidelines, codified guidelines should be there. ठीक है. In fact, you can write one point here. Strict action against those who are derelicting their duty, as in who are not performing their duty in an unbiased manner. So strict action against those who are not performing their duty in an unbiased manner. ठीक है? Exactly, Amit. Education needs to be decommunalized. So when you write value-based education without any ideological coloration, it is the same thing. ठीक है? Vaibhav, generate awareness through नुक्कड़ नाटक at grassroots level. Fine. जब हमने एक point लिखा था ना, use of various cultural platforms to facilitate peace and harmony between different religious groups. So various cultural platforms में one of the platform can also be in the form of street plays, नुक्कड़ नाटक. Is that clear? Absolutely. एक point लिख सकते हैं, वो नहीं हमने लिखा है. Awareness with respect to schemes and provisions. ऐसा नहीं है that government is not doing anything. There has to be proper awareness with respect to different schemes which the government, like 15-point program है, नई रोशनी है, नई मंजिल है. There are a lot of schemes which are launched for the minorities. एक जियो पारसी campaign था, ठीक है. So there are a lot of efforts which have been made by the government with respect to these religious minorities. So yes, adequate awareness generation with respect to their schemes so that they can assert their rights and entitlements. So that can be there. Is that clear? Fine. Media ethics, that is one point which we need to write. Strengthening of media ethics. Responsible journalism is the need of the hour. एक पॉइंट और लिख सकते हैं. रिमेंबर हमने एक विमेन इशू में एक पॉइंट लिखा था, इट इज द सर्टेनिटी ऑफ द लॉ रादर देन द सिवियरिटी विच एक्ट एज अ डेटरेंट फैक्टर. सो जहां पे आपने क्रिमिनल जस्टिस सिस्टम लिखा है ना, वहां पे भी लिख दो इंश्योरिंग सर्टेनिटी. पुअर कन्विक्शन रेट or the pendency of the cases is one of the major factor why these incidences are on the rise, because there is no fear, there is no deterrence. तो जहां आपने क्रिमिनल जस्टिस सिस्टम लिखा है, ये पॉइंट्स और ऐड कर सकते हो. ठीक है. थोड़ा एथिकल पॉइंट डालना है लॉन्ग टर्म में. डेवलपमेंट ऑफ सेल्फ अवेयरनेस, creation of emotional intelligence among people. The more emotionally intelligent you are, the more empathetic you would be towards the needs of the other. तो जब हम ethics पढ़ेंगे तो हम ये पढ़ेंगे anyway. तो एक काम करते हैं, यहां पे ये points रखते हैं, ethical वाला dimension तब डाल देंगे. But anyhow, if you want to write long term में आप लिख सकते हो creating a virtuous society. राम राज्य. गांधी जी का राम राज्य, क्रिएट a virtuous society or a morally correct society, ethical society. The day you are able to create a Ram Rajya, you are able to create morally virtuous society, ethical society, then everybody knows what is right, what is wrong. They have the capacity to discriminate, to differentiate between right and wrong. Automatically, these problems would be addressed. ठीक है? So create a section of emotionally intelligent people. ठीक है? इनफैक्ट किसी ने ये पॉइंट लिखा है फेक न्यूज वाला, तो ये जो फैक्ट चेक, सुषमा, तो ये जो फैक्ट चेक्स होते हैं ना, ये इंकरेज किए जा सकते हैं. सच एंडेवर्स कैन फर्दर बी encouraged. ये जो फैक्ट चेक वाले होते हैं कि every news which is being spread, there is a body which is always present to fact check to what extent the news is correct or not. So absolutely that can be written. ठीक है? So that can be ensured. बिल्कुल, एब्सोल्युटली बच्चे. 2-3 पॉइंट्स ना बड़े स्टैंडर्ड होते हैं, पॉलिटिकल विल की जरूरत है, वो सब तो वो लिखना चाहो तो लिखो. प्रशांत, फॉर एटीट्यूडनल चेंज व्हाट नीड्स टू बी डन. बच्चे यही तो है सोशलाइजेशन, तभी तो एटीट्यूड चेंज होगा. राइट काइंड ऑफ सोशलाइजेशन. एटीट्यूड बनता कहां से है? वैल्यू सिस्टम से, पढ़ेंगे एथिक्स में. इट इज योर वैल्यू विच शेप्स योर एटीट्यूड. सो एंड हाउ डू योर वैल्यू सिस्टम गेट शेप? थ्रू द प्रोसेस ऑफ सोशलाइजेशन. So what are the agencies of socialization? Your family, media, education, religion, leadership, ठीक है ना? Your peer group. These are the people who are responsible for shaping your value system. So for the attitudinal change, all these agencies of socialization needs to be checked. ठीक है? So start the change from the family level. Long term. बच्चे, this I've written secular education plus value based education without any ideological coloration. वोडनाला. अच्छा वैभव, ओके. हाँ, दिव्यांश, इज दिस क्लियर? सेक्युलर एजुकेशन प्लस वैल्यू बेस्ड एजुकेशन विदाउट एनी आइडियोलॉजिकल कलरेशन. अंशुल, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन एंड करप्शन. हाँ बच्चे, बट इन दिस केस इट इज मोर ऑफ मॉरल करप्शन. ठीक है ना? दैट इज वाई वी आर टाइम एंड अगेन फोकसिंग ऑन वैल्यू सिस्टम. हाँ, फाइन फाइन आशीष. नेशनल फाउंडेशन ऑफ कम्युनल हार्मनी. अच्छा, अब क्लियर. अच्छा ये पॉइंट अब मुझे समझ नहीं आ रहा. लॉन्ग टर्म तो यही लिखा था, अब मैंने क्लियर कर दिया है ना, क्योंकि मैं इतनी देर से आप लोग के मैसेजेस पढ़ नहीं रही थी. दिव्यांश, have I made it clear now? Secular education plus value based education without any ideological coloration. This is the second point of long term. ठीक है? In fact, there was a statement, I am just reiterating what Abu has written. There was a statement in NCERT that one cannot hold state responsible for social change every time. And no matter how weak it is, no group is always a victim. I'll just reiterate. Let me just recall exact statement. Write down wherever you find space. It might be helpful in writing conclusions. Government भी खुश हो जाएगी कि उन पे हम blame नहीं डाल रहे हैं. Write down, you cannot always hold state responsible. You cannot always hold state responsible for social change. For social change, you cannot always hold state responsible for social change, and no matter how weak it is, no matter how weak it is, no group always remains a victim. No matter how weak it is, no group always remains a victim. कहने का मतलब है, the one with Abu quoted, that it's high time. Let's stop blaming government and holding government responsible for bringing social change. It is high time we as a community should also take an initiative. राइट. फॉर एग्जाम्पल जैसे एक बहुत लोकल लेवल पे बताती हूँ, जैसे जो रेसिडेंशियल वेलफेयर एसोसिएशंस होते हैं, देर आर मेनी cities where they have seen that proactively these residential welfare association they conduct workshops so as to make people aware about the culture of the people who have been living in their area. For example, साउथ दिल्ली में देखने को मिलता है कि ये जो associations होती हैं, they kind of conduct workshops so as to make people aware about the culture of the African students, because there are a lot of African students who are living in South Delhi, right? So in order to make them aware so that there is more coherence, there is more harmony and peace among these different racial groups, so as to avoid any situation of conflict, so as to avoid any situation of violent confrontation, there is more of such workshops which are being organized to create harmony among the people of different interest and communities. Is that very clear? So ऐसा भी किया जा सकता है, holding workshops. तो वहां के लिए NGOs, civil societies, they have to do proactive participation. Is that very clear? Somebody talked about charismatic personality. Absolutely charismatic personality का role किसी ने लिखा था और हम ये पहले भी लिख चुके हैं. The role of charismatic personality or eminent personalities are very important to bring about change. So if charismatic personalities are promoting religious harmony in the society, the eminent personalities are spreading religious harmony, it will have positive impact on the psyche of the people. Is this very clear for everyone? Is it making sense? Okay? So on this note, we will conclude the lecture, and I have given you one question now with respect to increased incidences of communal violence. Suggest some measures which can be taken to address the menace. So yes, this is the answer for the question. However, write down a UPSC question. Write down a UPSC question. एक question था यार. Just give me 1 minute. Exact मुझे words देखने दो. हाँ. Communalism arises, this would be the assignment question for the day. Communalism arises due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Discuss. Communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Discuss. Communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Discuss. Either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Discuss. It was UPSC question asked in 2018. Just 2 minutes. Just go through the question and tell me, will you be able to write the answer? Communalism arises either due to power struggle or relative deprivation. Discuss. Will you be able to write the answer? Just answer, will you be able to write this answer? पक्का? असाइनमेंट क्वेश्चन बना लें इसको. ठीक है? So this becomes the assignment question for the day, and with this we will conclude the lecture. ठीक है? So I'm generally asking, I'm going to reiterate myself. We have discussed in the class that what led to the evolution of communalism, everything. But this specific thing was not mentioned, power struggle or relative deprivation. मतलब एक दो points में हमने use किया था. But which I can see from the response portal that you can answer the question, right? So if you have noticed up till now, whatever lectures that we had, just by focusing on the broader picture which is being provided in the class, even then you will be able to answer the question. Just have a right idea that in what direction the preparation has to be channelized. That is all what is required. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. So on this note, we conclude the lecture. I will be meeting you now, I think on 11th. Okay, that is the next lecture that we have. And we'll continue, I think, regionalism, racial intolerance, that we will discuss. किसी ने मुझसे पूछा है written with white pen, वहां awareness with respect to schemes, awareness with respect to schemes. I think this is what you are asking. ठीक है ना? Written with white pen ना? Awareness with respect to different schemes which are there for religious minorities. Ravi. ठीक है? हाँ ठीक है, पावर स्ट्रगल में एब्सोल्युटली यस. ठीक है, चलो बाय पीपल, गुड नाइट.